Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic manner. Today, we are taking a dive into everybody's favorite 5-pound mushy membrane to explore the link between our mental state and one of the most prevalent metabolic conditions that us intelligent walking apes face. We're looking at the connection between depression and insulin resistance, and how there is an oh so common, often forgotten, secret link between the two that could be orchestrating this nefarious metabolic symphony. Can symphonies be evil and nefarious? Production team, fact check that for me. Thanks. And this evil composer happens to be chronic inflammation. Now, if all this sounds like foreign language to you, don't sweat it. We'll be freshening up on all of these conditions in just a second. In fact, over the course of the next 13 minutes and 73 seconds, we'll be covering much more, including what depression and insulin resistance actually are, the chronic inflammation connection, along with some new research that explores this surprising, yet not so surprising, associations between these metabolic and psychological conditions. Oh, and of course some strategies that you may be able to utilize to right the 5-pound mushy membrane and pretty cool meat suit shit. That was supposed to read ship. Pretty cool meat suit ship. Thanks for reviewing the script, production team. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to bring forward some evolutionary survival theory regarding chronic depression that I stumbled upon a few years back. And it's something that I want you to noodle on as we go through this powwow. This theory suggests that when the body is in a heightened immune system state, it wants to entice rest, downregulating its desire and energy to do other things. Okay, so noodle on that and we will revisit it at the end. With that, our first stop is everybody's favorite 5-pound mushy membrane. Depression and the brain. Not to be confused with Pinky and the Brain, which is like the opposite of depression and the brain. If you are a human, and even if you're an extraterrestrial life form posing as one, you've experienced feeling down in the dumps. Feeling like complete and total garbage, mentally impaired and physically fatigued, motivation non-existent, self-worth in the gutter, and self-care nowhere on the menu. These are many of the signs of a depressive episode, and they are all a part of being a human, a byproduct of having the most advanced, cognitively capable mind on this planet that we know of. Always gotta throw that in. What differs is each individual's ability to break through the episode and get back to their functional baseline. The problems begin to arise when these symptoms start to become one's baseline, ranging from days to weeks to months to years. And this is clinically diagnosed as depression, a diagnosis that is anything but rare. Depression affects over 168 million people worldwide and is one of the major causes of disease burden across the world. And the tough thing about it is there isn't one clear answer to what it is and how it operates. But there seem to be some commonalities across the board, including an imbalance of hormones and neurotransmitters, genetic predispositions, emotional lifestyle factors such as stress, anxiety, and trauma, environment, both social and physical, lifestyle like diet, sleep, and exercise, and metabolic dysfunction or impaired biological function due to a mix and match of a lot of the factors that we literally just went through. Long story short, there is no easy answer. And everyone battling this condition seems to have some sort of unique list of variables. But that being said, some risk factors have proven to be more prevalent in the general population than others. For example, the metabolic consequences of poor lifestyle habits. And one of the growing metabolic conditions happens to be insulin resistance. What exactly is resisting what? Insulin resistance is characterized as a condition that impairs our cells' ability to respond properly to one of the most critical hormones involved in energy regulation. It is a complicated condition in which three primary metabolic tissues that are sensitive to insulin, skeletal muscle, liver, and white adipose tissue, become less sensitive to it and its downstream metabolic effects. In fact, there is a disease state that is used to classify full-fledged insulin resistance, and that is type 2 diabetes, which globally affects over 6% of the world's population, or an estimated 462 million people. Yeah, that's a lot. And it's actually higher in developed countries.
What the hell did you just say?
For example, 1 in 10 people battle it in the United States. And here's the thing, that's only the diagnosed people.
Wait, what?
Studies have estimated that at least 1 in 3 adults are walking around this beautiful floating rock with insulin resistance. The majority not having a damn clue, and thus being in an impaired metabolic and biochemical state and thinking it's normal. Yikes. Insulin resistance also happens to be associated with obesity, hypertension, hyperglycemia, polycystic ovary syndrome, and metabolic syndrome across the board. And it's likely to be one of the first metabolic warning signs that an individual is beginning to teeter on the edge of metabolic disease, making it not surprising that the association between insulin resistance and mental disorders already exists. For example, it's been shown that about 40% of patients experiencing mood disorders were insulin resistant. And animal models have shown that insulin resistance increases the risk of depression-like behaviors, as well as neuroinflammation, dysregulated mitochondria function, and decreased neurogenesis. All factors hypothesized to be relevant in human depression. Whoa. And wouldn't you know it, one of the most common co-associations with this cellular and metabolic dysfunction is the chronic overactivity of our immune system. Otherwise, what I like to call longevity liability numero uno. Chronic inflammation. Could this be the connecting factor? Last week, we talked about how metabolic dysfunction throughout the body, along with the dysfunction of the oh-so-precious blood-brain barrier, can nurture an environment where neurotoxic waste accumulates in our noggin and eventually begins to deteriorate our neurons down the line. Yep, it's a doozy. So if you're interested, check it out after. There, we talk about the long-term effects of inflammation in the brain. But what about the short term, the today, tomorrow, the next week, next month effects? Well, recent literature has displayed an undeniable relationship between the activity of the immune system and neurological changes, along with subsequent psychological symptoms, identifying a clear role of the immune system in mental health and psychological disorders. Research has found that subjects with higher depression and fatigue have higher levels of inflammatory immune activation, with a number of underlying mechanisms being identified in play here. One being cytokine-induced sickness, or decreased activity, depression, and loss of energy because of increased circulating levels of pro-inflammatory immune system signaling molecules called cytokines. And cytokine activity typically becomes heightened during infection or cellular dysfunction. Think senescent cells, visceral fat, and cancer, all tightly associated with metabolic disease. There's also been higher rates of depression and fatigue shown across conditions associated with the activation of the immune system, such as allergies, autoimmune disease, and infections in general. And in the case of lifestyle disease, such as type 2 diabetes, meta-analyses have found that the prevalence of depression in patients with type 2 diabetes is up to twice as high compared to people without the disease, with strong associations between depression and serum levels of inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein and interleukin-1 in type 2 diabetes patients. Mix this with dysfunction in the key barrier regulating passage into our brain, the blood-brain barrier, and the inflammatory stew of metabolic dysfunction is just becoming more potent. So I ask again, could inflammation be the evil witch laughing at the handle of said stew? Yeah, I know, some next level imagery. So let's look at some new data. So a research team at Stanford analyzed 601 men and women who served as controls for the Netherlands study of depression and anxiety. Participants were an average age of 41 years old and had no prior depression or anxiety. The research team decided to measure 3 proxies of insulin resistance: fasting blood glucose levels, waist circumference, and ratio of circulating triglyceride levels to those circulating high-density lipoprotein, or HDL, cholesterol. They probed the data to see if subjects who were found to be insulin resistant had a heightened 9-year risk of developing a major depressive disorder. And by all 3 measures, the answer was yes. They discovered that a moderate increase in insulin resistance, as measured by the triglyceride to HDL ratio, was linked to an 89% increase in the rate of new cases of major depressive disorders. Similarly, every 5 centimeter increase in abdominal fat was related to an 11% higher rate of depression, and an increase of fasting plasma glucose of 18 milligrams per deciliter of blood was associated with a 37% higher rate of depression. Damn. All in all, these 3 surrogate measures of insulin resistance positively predicted incidence of major depression disorders in a 9-year follow-up period among these adults with no previous history of depression or anxiety disorders. And I know what you're thinking. Prior to this powwow, these findings would have been surprising. But knowing what we now know about depression, insulin resistance, and inflammation, these findings are just kind of reinforcing. And the conclusion to our evolutionary survival theory may be a tad more compelling as well. You do remember the unproven theory from before, right? Suggesting that when the body is in an heightened immune system state, it wants to entice rest, downregulating its desire and energy to do other things as a survival mechanism. Well, how exactly does it do this? It becomes tired, lethargic, unmotivated, and fatigued, inducing a state of wakeful hibernation. Sound familiar? Kinda like the symptoms of depression? But why exactly is it doing this? Well, it's thought that it's probably giving the immune system priority to do its thing. The problem obviously arises when we are chronically inflamed due to metabolic dysfunction, as well as psychological and environmental stressors. And when this happens, we're always in this state of chronic depression. Damn, that's some deep shit. And again, unproven theory, but one that makes a hell of a lot of sense. So with all this, how can we mitigate our depressive risk? First off, if you are dealing with chronic depression or you have dealt with it, you know firsthand that there is no easy answer. There can be and probably is a vast array of underlying drivers. And just as we saw, metabolic dysfunction and its oftentimes accomplice, chronic inflammation, can be powerful modulators. So here are some hopefully helpful tips to noodle on. Before you go bottoms up in the prescriptions, ask yourself, have I made the conscious effort to maximize the following natural health and healing factors? First, nature. Do you get consistent fresh air, sunlight, and connection to the earth? There is a growing body of evidence supporting the strong association between nature and overall health, cellular, metabolic, and psychological, having the ability to influencing things such as stress levels, micronutrient balances, and inflammation levels, which we cover in a number of other videos that I will link below. So try and aim for 20 to 60 minutes outdoors 3 to 4 times a day. And if you mix this with some movement, you get bonus points. Speaking of movement, next, exercise, or what I like to call the best mood boosting prescription there is. When you exert yourself physically, you not only alter your physiological state, but your biochemical state as well, activating ancient parts of the brain such as the periaqueductal gray to release natural pain-relieving opioids and cannabinoids. You also stimulate the production of mood-boosting neurochemicals called endorphins, which set the vibe right. 30 minutes of moderate exercise a day will do wonders for your mind. And when it's time to refuel, some good mood food is a good option. These are high-quality foods and beverages and are packed with macro and micronutrients that will support proper energy metabolism, nervous system function, a healthy microbiome, and provide an anti-inflammatory effect instead of an inflammatory effect. These are real foods. Organic, pasture-raised, grass-fed, free-range, and wild. Check out this video which breaks down everything you need to know. And once you're nourished up, double down on the top cellular and metabolic performance enhancing habit that you can do. Get good sleep. Getting good sleep is hard, and getting good quality sleep is harder. But when you build good routines and sleep hygiene, it could be life-changing. There's so much to talk about here, so just go over to my How to Sleep playlist and watch every video twice. Promise you, you'll be sleeping like a baby in no time. Finally, ask yourself, how do I manage stress? We know that chronic elevation of the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system is associated with all things nefarious at the cellular, metabolic, and psychological levels. It happens to also be attached to the hip with chronic inflammation. Oh boy. Breath work, meditation, journaling, self-care, exercise, and real nourishment are all ways to modulate the stress response in your favor. I'll link some helpful videos below to get you back on the stress-free track. Hey, just some things to think about. Having an optimally running, pretty cool meat suit and 5-pound mushy membrane doesn't just happen, but it certainly is 100% possible. So wherever you are right now, whatever mental or physical state that you are in, know that you have the power to implement meaningful change. Change that can spark a trickle-down effect of regained health and newfound longevity. Finally, writing the off-course 5-pound mushy membrane and pretty cool meat shit once and for all. Damn it, production team. Again. Goodbye.